Thanks for staying with us on the Monday Report. Time now for the, should I call it mini town hall session, so to speak. And tonight we are talking about the gender agenda. Because, as you know, the country is now 7 days or so away from knowing or getting a complete list of who the running mates will be for the respective candidates. And as I mentioned earlier, the choice will be a crucial one. It could make or break any presidential campaign. But are presidential candidates and are their parties concerned by the question of the gender of the running mate? That's what we want to explore this evening. 22423 is the SMS line, and the hashtag is the Monday Report. And let me introduce my guests who will help us just quickly understand what some of the issues are. Joining us here in studio today is Anne Ireri. She's the chair of the Election Observation Group, ELOG, and also the executive director of FIDA. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Wahiga.
Karibu sana. She's here together with Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a former commissioner at the National Gender and Equality Commission. Priscilla, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Anne, I think let me start with you and immediately get your thoughts on that. Do you think our candidates, do you think our parties, from what you've seen so far as you take a survey of the landscape, are they concerned by the question of the gender of their potential running mates?
Thank you very much, Wahiga. Indeed, it's an exciting time to be Kenyan, to be a woman, and to see the progression we've seen, especially in other arms of government, that really actualize the agenda of women in leadership. As you rightly put it, gender is a main question, and in fact, I'd be concerned if there's any political formation or any party that is not taking the women's agenda right now seriously, because it is center stage, it is an innovation, it is the fresh nuance that is being brought to the table this time round. And from where we sit, there is no shortage of women. We have exemplary women who have presented themselves across the board, across the 6 seats. And so we are hoping that for parties who are serious and have seen the progression and the ability of women, that they are going to take the question of women within their various seats and, of course, up to the top very, very seriously. Is the motive of presidential candidates and their parties as to who they'll finally pick as a running mate, and if it's a woman for that case, is that important? And I want to read a blog quote that I recently came across. It says, and I quote, "The time has come, therefore, for a woman to be deputy president, not for tokenism's sake or affirmative action's sake, but because it is the moral and right thing to do." Help me. Let me pick your mind on that. Is the motive also important, or does it matter that you just get as many women as possible into political positions? The motive is very fundamental. I speak from a place where we are governed by our constitution, and being the major law in our country, Wahiga, it has spelled out in various articles, starting from Article 10 to the electoral process in the country, the duties of political parties, to really defining the executive's role, and as well as parliament, that women and the gender question is very important. From statistics, we know even from the most recent census that women form not just half, but more than half of the discussion. And so to quote famous speakers who have indicated, how do we discuss more than half of the population without them at the table? So what we're indicating as women, as leaders, is that time is now, and we are particularly happy with the position the IBC has taken. They're not nudging, they are not buckling, they have put their firm foot that this time round we have to see compliance. Bearing in mind, Wahiga, we are actually speaking of a country where a Chief Justice Emeritus, in his final act of office, has given an advisory to the head of state to dissolve parliament because of failing to fulfill its promise to the women of this country. So we are really speaking to Article 81. Time is now, and we are hoping that the main political parties will not look at it as tokenism, but because women have proven time and time again that we are capable and equal to the task, not just as leaders, but remember, women are also participants. They are voters in the process, so we need them at the table, and it is important that we walk the talk this time. And I'll come back to you to dig a bit deeper into the gender rule discussion, parties, IBC's deadline, and so forth, which I believe is today, May 9th. But first, Priscilla, coming to you, you've, for lack of a better expression, been in the struggle for some time now in regards to women's rights. From where you sit right now, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Is there hope from what you see? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there is hope. We've seen more women come out to seats that women didn't come out for before, like gubernatorial. So we have quite a number of candidates on the gubernatorial seat. I think Gladys Wanga in Homa Bay, and Cecily Mbarire in Embu, and Susan Kiheka in Nakuru and Aisha Jumwa. So, I mean, I think that's a better environment around which the women are contesting, and then we still have Charity Ngilu defending her seat. Kirinyaga is almost an all-women's affair with Governor Anne Waiguru and Ngirishi. So it's better. I mean, even on the Senate, I'm running for Senate myself, and seen quite a number of women get senatorial tickets, too, from the strong parties. I think I've seen Tabitha Karanja in Nakuru, seen Margaret Wanjiru Bishop here in Nairobi, and myself in Nyeri, and I think Lydia Nomolo in Embu. So the environment and the terrain is looking better and is looking littered, and the same for parliamentary seats. MCA seats, you know, even higher numbers of women coming out. And I like that many of the women who are nominated are actually putting themselves out for competitive seats. Many of the women who've served as women rep are putting themselves out for competitive seats. So I think this is our best moment, even without the formula, because remember, the formula did not pass in Parliament, as Anne says correctly. We did not fulfill the requirements as the Chief Justice Advisory had said. So even without that, we actually look set to get the best of the gender agenda in the ballot. I think that's a good.
What do you think is different about 2022 that wasn't present in 2017 or 2013? And more specifically, what are those barriers that you think held women back in previous elections?
I think that one of the things that has been good is the role modeling. I think to have watched Charity Ngilu, Anne Waiguru, and Joyce Laboso, you know, may she rest in peace, to have watched the first women governors, and then Fatuma Dulo and Senator Kihika and Kavindu in Machakos. Just the role modeling, I think that's working better for this election. And I think that some of the barriers that remain include, of course, resources. I think that's still a big question. And then just the patriarchy and the patriarchal systems that we continue to be under, which is what is affecting the running mate question. But in terms of the seats, gubernatorial, I'm also happy about the opposite gender rule in the gubernatorial seats. Many male governors are picking women deputy governors. And so the barriers are there in the sense of resources, in the sense of patriarchy, in the sense of a bit of violence, cyberbullying. I think that continues to be a problem. But women are defying all that, defying the barriers and going for the ceiling. And I think that if we crush the ceiling in this election, I think we will be unstoppable of that art.
Let me pick up from where you left off and allow Anne to weigh in. And since independence, we've had several vice presidents / now deputy president under the new constitution, about 11 or so. And yet no woman has sat in that seat or in the presidency, whereas in the East African region, in the EAC, apart from, I think, DR Congo, every other country, Uganda, Tanzania, etc., they've all had women at that particular level. What makes our country so unique when we are known to be so progressive in every other aspect?
Thank you. I think for us, from where we sit, it's more of us having women leaders the unusual more than the norm. If you look at the progress that countries such as Tanzania, Rwanda, and Uganda have made, they have normalized that it is okay to have a woman as a vice president, it is okay to have a woman as a president, and that's what ideally it should be as a prime minister. So what we are urging Kenyans to do, and for now we even have such a great example in the current Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice, who are running their offices first and foremost as extremely qualified judges of the Supreme Court who happen to be women. And so for us, we are urging Kenyans not to look at the gender question. Don't look at aspirants and candidates as them being women. Look at them as leaders. And from where we sit, as I've mentioned, we have such a rich database. As Priscilla has said, we are so excited as women. If you look at the quality of those who have presented themselves for office, they're really viable leaders. So if we can look at them from that perspective, normalize having women at the table, normalize having women leaders, then we will not be speaking too much and finding it as such a big issue that we must consistently speak about gender issues, because we'll have understood the value women bring to the table and we'll be very keen to normalize it across the board.
Priscilla, I'll also want your weighing in on this, but Anne, help me think through this as well. What has it meant to have a female Chief Justice, and what could it mean to have a female or a woman Deputy President? How do you think that would change the gender conversation?
One, I think as a country we'll be very conscious of the role women and girls play that is not necessarily threatening the role of men and boys in society. It is appreciating that we each have strengths that are equal in terms of leadership, but especially on matters that have been affecting women and girls, questions of violence, questions of resource allocation. We sit in a country where we are yet to get to the aspiration of having completely zero-rated dignity parks for girls, for example. We will have that kind of progression. And so for us, from my experience, what we are speaking to is the clamor why women were very vocal and have remained vocal that we have to be part of the decision-making is because there are matters that need the women's voice. And we're not saying these are the softer issues, these are the less important issues. If you look at even conflict right now, who bears a bigger brunt of conflict? It's women and children. They're the ones who are very busy being evacuated. It's the mothers and the children who have to miss out on school. And so for us, having women at that particular leadership role, if you look at the presidency, Wahiga, as outlined in our constitution, it's the most powerful institution. Besides it being very focused on security of the country, it's also a symbol of national unity. And so if we can incorporate the women's voice within the national unity and symbol of us being unified, the better. Then we'll be able to speak not as Kenyan men and women, but as Kenyans who are unified and who appreciate both men and women have what it takes to bring the conversation of leadership to the table.
Priscilla, you can weigh in. Same question. What would it mean to have a woman deputy president? How would that change the conversations we're having even here today?
I think in many respects. One, we of course joined the League of Nations that are progressive. Now, we've got, most of Africa has patriarchy, sometimes even the West. The US just has the first, woman vice president. But what it does mean here, our patriarchy is like COVID. It's like the strongest strain, Here in East Africa, we have the strongest strain of patriarchy, if you could say that. Because Uganda, Tanzania, and even Ethiopia, even South Sudan, you wouldn't even be surprised that even the recent democracy here in Africa, in South Sudan, has better numbers of women than what we have. So we join a League of Nations, we join a better club, and we are progressive on many fronts, so we are progressive on that front as well. And then in Ghana, when they got the first Chief Justice, which we have now in Kenya, they got the first Speaker who was a woman, and then went on that way to having women as running mates of strong parties. And so it's a progression. So even here the same, we have the first woman Chief Justice, we get the first woman running mate, and then it is possible even the speakership might open either the National Assembly or the Senate, and then the conversation is much better in terms of good leaders, that a good leader can be male and a good leader can be female, and then we don't have gender as a barrier to leadership. And the presidency now becomes you can actualize it. You see, now we are so far from it, you can't even dream it. When you have a woman as running mate, that the woman is very, very close to, the presidency is a heartbeat away. So you can start to dream about having a woman president here in our country, in our lifetime.
Okay, and I'm glad you've given us the optimistic perspective, but we know that as we sit here tonight, the reality, so to speak, qua ground is a bit different. We know the IEBC have had to warn several political parties, majority of political parties, that they need to align whoever they've nominated to be future MPs under their party or senators, that they haven't complied with the gender rule. And some leaders have then asked their parties to challenge that requirement by the IEBC in court, saying that if you force parties to adhere to the gender rule, then you may deny Kenyans their right to choose leaders. There's a school of thought out there like that. I want to get your response to that. Well,
the good thing is IEBC is itself enforcing a court order. Remember this decision by IEBC, it is pursuant to a court order. And there are several court orders actually on matters of two-thirds. There's sufficient clarity as far as the courts are concerned on matters of two-thirds and the roles of parties in effecting the two-thirds gender rule. It actually almost came into constitutional language with the two-thirds, with the BBI. Remember, it was part of the requirements of BBI. And so I don't see anybody succeeding in court on that account. What I think the parties should do, and I think where they should spend more energy, is in compliance, as opposed to spending energy in challenging. Let them spend time in complying.
Why do you think that it's been so difficult to get them to comply? I mean, they knew about it.
That's true.
This hasn't been a secret.
That's true.
You in the political arena, why do you think party leaders are so
I just think
obstinate?
That for some reason, parties think that they can get away with it. And I join Anne in supporting the IEBC. Not this time. They have gotten away with it in 2010, in 2013, in 2017. I think now that the courts have already spoken, IBC is enforcing the decision. Half of the parties, by the way, let's congratulate those that have, it's not all bad, it's a mixed bag. I think half the parties have complied. Let the balance of the parties comply. And it's only National Assembly and Senate, remember. It's not in all the seats. So I have seen, for example, the comments about the majority leader, Adan Duale, and the UDA. Let them comply. Let all the parties comply. Let us spend time on compliance. And you know, this time we have consensus as a way of nomination. So let this consensus also generate women.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. Anne, I need to take a break, but do you have a last thing to say on the same before we take that break?
Yes, absolutely. I also think it's a dangerous narrative by the political parties, because when you indicate that you're not going to end up with good leaders, is it alluding that the women are not good leaders? I think it's really an excuse, as Priscilla has said. And further, looking at the barriers that historically have barred women, things that have hindered them, women movements have been really at the forefront. This time round, I'll speak for the example of FIDA, in terms of capacity building, in terms of ensuring the women have information, in terms of ensuring disputes are resolved. So really, we've even isn't work for the political parties, and there's no excuse. If they're serious, and we have seen the numbers of aspirants who are women, young women across the sector, it is a lack of political will, and we frankly say so. And I think they need to get back to the drawing board. It's not too late, and give the women who were at nominations, a number of them, a fair chance, and they'll be able to comply for those who've not been able to comply.
Okay. And just a quick one on the women's vote. Remember the voters are watching, and the most faithful vote, and I can speak as somebody who's been voted, is actually the women's vote. So what are you telling the women voters? That you don't have women who can run for seats? Remember, as a political party, you are then risking your own win.
Strong statements there by my guests here in studio as to why any serious presidential candidate, one worth their salt, should consider a female running mate this time round. We come back because I'm seeing all your questions and comments. Let's take a break, come back. I'm going to read some of them for my guests to respond to. 22422 is the SMS line, and the hashtag is Monday Report. A very interesting discussion that we're having here in studio today that could shape the future of this country. And that's why you want to stay for part 2. We'll be right back with that.